Imagine this. You board a flight in the year 1955. You glance at your watch. Everything seems perfectly normal. The engines roar, the runway disappears beneath you, and within minutes you are flying high above the clouds. But when your plane finally lands, the world has changed. It is no longer 1955. It is 1997. Yes, this is the unbelievable story of Pan Am Flight 914. A plane that took off for a short journey, but didn't return for 42 years. Was it lost in the sky? Did it vanish over the ocean? Or was it trapped in a mystery that defies science itself? Let's go back to the beginning. It was July 2, 1955, a bright and beautiful morning. At New York's John F. Kennedy Airport, passengers were boarding Pan Am Flight 914, heading to Miami, Florida for a relaxing vacation. There were 57 passengers and 4 crew members, 61 people in total. The aircraft was a Douglas DC-4, registration number N2914, a strong and reliable plane of its time. In the cockpit sat Captain Charles Taylor, a highly experienced pilot with over 10,000 flight hours, and his young co-pilot Juan, completing the final stage of his training. At exactly 10 a.m., the engines thundered to life. The plane raced down the runway and lifted smoothly into the sky. Passengers relaxed. Some sipped coffee, others read newspapers. Children pressed their faces against the windows, smiling at the clouds. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. About 40 minutes after takeoff, while cruising over the Atlantic Ocean, chaos erupted. 3 men suddenly stood up from their seats. They pulled out weapons. They were hijackers. Screams filled the cabin. Children cried. Panic spread like wildfire. The hijackers stormed the cockpit and pointed a gun at Captain Taylor, ordering him to change course. But in the middle of the struggle, something went terribly wrong. A strange chemical canister inside one of the hijackers' bags accidentally leaked. Within seconds, thick white gas began spreading through the cabin. It wasn't ordinary smoke, it was a powerful unconsciousness-inducing gas. Through the ventilation system, it spread everywhere. One by one, passengers, crew members, even the hijackers themselves collapsed into deep unconsciousness. At 10,000 feet above the ocean, the plane became a ghost aircraft. No one was awake. The autopilot kept it flying. But during the struggle, the navigation system had been altered. Instead of heading toward Miami, the plane drifted in an unknown direction over the vast Atlantic. Hours passed. The fuel gauge slowly moved toward empty. Warning lights blinked in the cockpit, but there was no one conscious to see them. As evening approached, the engines began to fail. One by one, they shut down. The roaring sound disappeared. Now the aircraft wasn't flying. It was gliding like a giant metal bird slowly losing height. Below was nothing but endless ocean. Death seemed certain. But fate had something else planned. Through the mist, an isolated green island appeared. The plane descended rapidly. The landing gear did not deploy. A belly landing was the only option. With a violent impact, the aircraft slammed into shallow water and sand near the shore. Sparks flew. One wing broke. The plane skidded toward the jungle's edge. It was a devastating crash, but miraculously, it did not explode. Fresh air rushed into the cabin. The gas slowly faded. Survivors began waking up. Out of 61 people, 24 had died in the crash, including some elderly passengers and the hijackers. 37 survived. They stumbled out of the wreckage, only to realize they were stranded on a deserted island. No airport. No city, no rescue. Just ocean on one side and dense jungle on the other. The radio was dead. Food was limited. Water was scarce. The first 48 hours felt like hell. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Luxury travelers became survivors. People who once ate burgers and pizza now survived on raw fish, crabs, and jungle animals. They built fishing tools from seat wires. They made shelters from aircraft debris. They formed a small council to maintain order. Money meant nothing. Skill meant everything. They preserved the aircraft carefully, protecting its engines from rust. Years passed. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Some died of illness and age. Others were born on that island. 11 children grew up knowing nothing of cities, only jungle and survival. Hope began to fade. But after nearly 20 years, the plane's engineer made a bold decision. Before he died, he began teaching the younger generation how aircraft engines worked. There was one massive problem: fuel. The original aviation fuel was long gone, so they created their own. Using sugarcane and wild starch roots, they produced ethanol through fermentation. It was slow, painfully slow, but year after year they collected hundreds of gallons. They cleared jungle to build a rough 1,000-foot runway by hand. They stripped the plane of unnecessary weight, seats, fittings, panels, everything. They created makeshift tires using natural rubber and animal hides. In the 38th year, they tried starting the engine. It failed. They cried. I cried again. Finally, one day, the engines roared back to life. That sound echoed across the island. It was not just noise, it was hope. In 1997, 42 years later, 52 surviving and newly born people boarded the hollowed aircraft. An elderly Captain Taylor, hands trembling but determined, sat in the cockpit once more. The plane rolled down the rough runway, and against all odds, it lifted into the sky. When Miami Air Traffic Control detected an unidentified old aircraft on radar, confusion spread. No modern transponder, no proper signal. When the plane landed, police and ambulances surrounded it. The door opened. Out walked people from 1955, now elderly, holding hands with jungle-born young adults. Families who had believed them dead for 4 decades stood frozen in disbelief before rushing forward in tears. It was a reunion the world would never forget. 42 years. One island. What? And the unbreakable power of human will. Pan Am Flight 914 reminds us of one simple truth. As long as hope lives, humanity survives.